Well, I think we've got a resolution. Major League Baseball has done a good job responding to the mess that has come out of the Miami Marlins. They have pointed out that the Marlins are an aberration, that we don't know exactly what happened, but it seems like the Marlins may well have gone out for a night on the town, at least some of them, in Atlanta, and that may well have ended up being how they got the infection spreading through their team. Major League Baseball released news that they had done 69, I believe, I'm going to pull it up to make sure, 6,900 tests on other players and had absolutely no positives. The Marlins are not going to play for the rest of the week, but for everybody else out there, this over 6,400, negative tests since Friday. Only the Marlins had any positives at all. And so that is a positive about Major League Baseball being able to continue with its season. And already the conversation in Major League Baseball has moved on from the Marlins and has now centered on, the Dodgers going up against the Astros last night. And I know some of you missed it, but the Dodgers, even with no crowds present and even without the usual intensity of a baseball game, the Dodgers had been waiting for this, and Joe Kelly, I believe, the reliever, went after the Houston Astros batters. Here is what it sounded like after his taking on the Astros for cheating. A lot of people have been waiting for this moment. I think we have the audio from AM 570 LA Sports in. Of this game last night as the benches cleared.
Swung on and missed, strike three.
And some barking going on out towards Joe Kelly.
As Kelly turns around, and both the Dodgers and the Astros are mouthing off, and Kelly finally arrives at the dugout, and he is still talking. The benches are beginning to clear. Oh, we knew it was nearly inevitable. Correa is barking. Kelly is barking. The teams have emptied the benches. It goes without saying there's not a whole lot of social distancing going on at the moment. The bullpens have emptied. No punches have been thrown. Just a lot of droplets are in the air. Terrence Gore, the new Dodger, has come out and said, "What am I doing here?" Well, the inning is now finally over. The altercation, such that it has ended.
All right, so that was a little bit of drama. It would have been wild if they actually had turned into a huge brawl in a socially distant age. That would have been a big issue for Major League Baseball to have to suspend a bunch of players in the midst of all of this. So maybe cooler heads have prevailed, but we got a bunch of Dodger fans on this show, and so I want to bring it in. Danny G, did you enjoy the Dodgers trying to get some revenge for the Astros cheating? Was this what you were hoping for?
Oh, I think the entire world was waiting for this moment, Clay. Joe Kelly, I tweeted last night that he was pulling a Ricky Wild Thing Vaughn out there because I'm not sure if he was really trying to throw at anyone. He was wild from the moment he stepped on the mound in relief, but still, first to see Bregman having to duck, and he was whining on the bench with the rest of the Astros. And then when Correa got struck out after he had one thrown over his head, that's when the chirping really started. And then the meme that's going around the internet is the face that Joe Kelly made, kind of calling him a baby with the face he made. And then that's when the benches cleared after the chirping. So a fun game last night, especially with the Dodgers winning. And, most Dodger fans were happy because they're like, oh, Joe Kelly's my new hero. But like I said, I really don't think he was trying to intentionally throw at the Astros batters. But as it goes, that's what the Astros get. One more game left in the series, and hopefully the Dodgers can win that one as well. And that's one good thing about this COVID-shortened season is that the Dodgers wouldn't even have gotten to face the Astros until next season had, the schedule not changed because of the virus.
I disagree. I think he was throwing at him.
You think so?
I mean, I know he was
wild though from the moment he got out there.
Yeah,
so
I know.
He might be a better actor than Charlie Sheen.
Yeah, it was. And look, I mean, I think he was throwing based on the way he was reacting after the sticking out his bottom lip and insulting the Astros and everything else. I'm curious whether this carries over now to, is it today's game they'll play again for another matchup?
Yes, yeah, game 2 of the series.
Yeah, and whether this is just like a little bit of a blip on the radar, but I'd be curious to watch it tomorrow to see what happens. Roberto, do you think as a Dodger fan that he was throwing at the Astros?
At first I did not, just because Joe Kelly's wild. He tends to be wild. But on my drive here to work, I listened to AM 570, and they were saying that there's some history there between Carlos Correa and Alex Bregman. So I do believe that there was maybe some intentions behind there. And the funny thing, after he struck him out, what irritated the Astros was that Joe Kelly said, "Nice swing,
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great.
Now, don't forget, Clay, Joe Kelly's the same guy where during the preseason, before spring training, the original spring training happened, a lot of the players, remember, were throwing to their backstops at home.
Oh, yeah.
And there's that famous clip of him breaking his own window.
Yeah.
Yes.
With that breaking pitch that went wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that it was totally coincidental. But if it was coincidental, it's probably the best coincidence of Joe Kelly's
and
career.
another thing that makes me think that maybe, he probably was trying, is because every team Joe Kelly's been on, he's been one of the toughest guys on the team, and every player in the clubhouse loves Joe Kelly for that.
I'm curious if the Astros will try and get any revenge when they play tonight, and what Major League Baseball would do if they had a full-on brawl in the middle of this socially distant era where they're already worried about the Marlins. I do think this is a good story for baseball. If I'm Rob Manfred, I'm excited to wake up today and have people talking about something that happened on the field as opposed to the things that have been happening off the field, right? Because baseball has basically been under siege since Monday over the Marlins, and now it seems like they've at least resolved the Marlins issue. Expectation is the Marlins will come back Monday and be ready to play again. And if no other positive tests happen, the wild thing, not to nod to Ricky Vaughn there, but the wildest thing about this Major League Baseball season is what you were just mentioning, Danny G, how fast it is. We are almost a tenth of the way through the season, and it doesn't take very much time for things to just keep rolling when you're only playing 60 games. Those things add up so quickly that I think with the NBA coming back tomorrow and with the NHL coming back Saturday, if you look at both of those, then all of the attention is going to shift away from baseball, and there will be a lot more mixing of sports coverage when all those different sports are going on a day-to-day basis. And so Major League Baseball won't be on the stage by itself to such an extent. But I do think it's a really good sign that it appears that the Marlins are an aberration. And let me just say this. If Major League Baseball can prove that the Marlins players went out socially in Atlanta, which seems to be where they got sick, in violation of the rules, shouldn't there be an argument that the commissioner could send a message to everybody else in Major League Baseball and cause them to have to forfeit all the games that they weren't able to play in? I mean, don't you think that potentially could be a move Rob Manfred makes to let all the Major League Baseball players and teams out there know, hey, this is serious, and if you violate our rules, and we know that it happened, like if you get sick because there was a baggage handler at your hotel that was sick and you're able to trace it back, or you just went to the hotel restaurant and you didn't do anything inappropriate and you got sick that way, that to me is a lot different than if you're on the road with your teammates and they can prove you went out. I'm going to bring in the crew. Is this an opportunity for Rob Manfred to send a message to the Marlins that the rest of baseball has to take note of? and say, hey, if we can prove, and it seems like they might be able to, that this was based on a group going out in contravention of the rules in Major League Baseball, and they put their season and other seasons in jeopardy by that decision, making them forfeit games and taking a penalty against them seems like a fair response to me. What about you, Danny G?
Well, they stink already, so
yeah.
Their penalty is, I don't think no matter what happens, they're not going to make the playoffs, even with the extended playoff teams this season. But, yeah, I'm down for that. The problem is, like you said, the proof. I mean, there was a picture of Lou Will. That's how we knew he was there. Had that rapper not taken that picture of him, he might have returned to the NBA bubble, and we would have never known.
I think 100% that's what would have happened.
Yeah, he wouldn't have had that extra quarantine. So we got that picture, but we don't have a picture of these Marlins out partying.
That we know.
We know of. You're right. It could surface.
Yeah. And the difficulty would be down the line if some other team has some players get sick, determining where they got sick as well with the precedent that might be set. I think maybe what Major League Baseball will do is put on the schedule the idea of double headers to try to make up for the games that the Marlins are losing, but also acknowledging that those games only need to be played if they end up being relevant. And as you said, the Marlins are not very relevant, so it could be that those games don't matter for them. Now, it might matter for the teams that they played against, so we'll have to see, especially in an expanded postseason, whether there's any sort of issue to the overall season standings if those games never get played. But it is at least an intriguing precedent to think about. Dub, did you enjoy the idea of the Astros and the Dodgers potentially getting into a brawl and having just some old-fashioned, clear bad blood going on? It felt like the season was back to normal, even though, like I said, you look into the crowd, there's nobody there in the Astros stadium, but it just feels like more normalcy just based on the way even those teams were going at each other.
Absolutely. It felt awesome to see a pitcher that was angry about something and taking shots at the opposing batter. That, to me, was like, all right, baseball is officially back. And as far as the Marlins story goes, I think the forfeiture of games would be appropriate. The only problem is I wouldn't really bank on anybody sending a picture. I mean, I was in Atlanta this weekend, and if all 14 of those guys walked past me, I would have had no idea who they were, I assume. Because, I mean, does anyone in the country know what any of these guys look like? Probably. I mean, Lou Williams is one thing, but some guys on the Marlins is another. But if they do end up proving that these guys were out and about and that's how they, caught the virus, I think there definitely needs to be a penalty laid down by Rob Manfred.
I mean, one way you could potentially find out would be by what the guy – I bet everybody put it on their credit card, right? I mean, you could almost tell everywhere I go if you check my credit card statement, and I would imagine that's true for a huge percentage of the Marlins if, in fact, they were out. There would be some evidence of it, and it may be that they've already admitted. Because I would think the contact tracing requires you to be honest with the people who are doing the contact tracing to try to figure out where they actually got exposed and how they ended up being sick. So I think this is an intriguing question for Rob Manfred going forward. And, I mean, I think, Lou Williams, to me, is getting off really easy with the 10-day quarantine because, as I think Danny G mentioned, if he hadn't gotten photographed, he could have potentially blown up the NBA bubble. And Dr. Chow has talked about this. One of the positives of the way that Major League Baseball is doing it and the way the NFL is going to do it and everything else is if one team gets sick, that doesn't necessarily mean that the other 29 teams or in the case of Major League Baseball or the other 31 teams in the case of the NFL also get sick. Right? So you ideally could keep that infection from spreading. If Lou Williams had come back and infected members of the Clippers, because everybody or many of these teams are in the same bubble, once you puncture that bubble, it could theoretically allow it to spread quicker because there are fewer players and they're all in close proximity. So there's been a lot of people out there arguing, this just proves how smart the NBA is and how smart the MLS is and how smart the NHL is. I would say just be easy, tap the brakes on that because you're relying on your players being honest and for an infection not to emerge because if it does, then it could spread a lot more rapidly to multiple teams through the NBA or the NHL, any of these other leagues that are creating a bubble scenario. See, what I think is probably the smartest play, if you're talking about the NFL, and you're like, okay, what would be the way for the NFL to really kind of set up their situation? Because some people immediately said, oh, let's look at what happened with the Marlins as evidence of what might happen in the NFL. But football doesn't have to travel that much. They only have to be on the road potentially for an entire season of NFL football for 8 nights, right? Most teams fly into their opponent on Saturday, that city, and stay until Sunday after the game, right? Then they hop back on their flight. Depending on the time of the game, it's even possible that some teams might decide to fly in on the day of the game. Now, I don't think that's going to become commonplace, but if you had a short trip to take, it's at least possible that you could consider doing that to limit the time on the ground. Either way, 8 days on the road throughout the entirety of the NFL is a really short period of time. And if you think about it, you could theoretically get a hotel near every team's training facility, and you could put everybody in that hotel, and you could keep them in close proximity to the facility and allow that to go on if you were really concerned, which would create 32 bubble environments inside of the NFL. Now, I don't know that that's going to end up being necessary, and I think the overall rate of infection is going to start to decline pretty substantially across much of the country. But if there was an outbreak in your particular city or your particular state and an NFL team wanted to limit their player interaction, I think that would be one way to adjust kind of on the fly to exactly what is going on there.